My name is Ben Williams. I'm a Texas broker in El Paso, Texas. I run a team called the War Team. Today, we're going to jump into the short sale process and talk about the short sale addendum on the back end. I got a couple people online with me from the team, and we're going to hop right in. We're going to talk about the ins and outs and complexities of the short sale process. The first thing I want to jump into is, what is a short sale? Short sale kind of occurs when it really occurs when a seller may be in a distress situation, meaning that they're unable to come up with their payments consistently. Something's happening in their life where they're having troubles and they're trying to do a short sale before they go into foreclosure. Typically, the house itself is probably the market value and what they owe versus market value. They're trying to get their investor to accept less than what they owe. That would enable them to sell it at a lesser price than what they owe. It's called a short sale because they're selling it short of what they owe. So that's the whole process with a short sale. A short sale is voluntary, it's more controlled. The seller is cooperating with everyone. It's better for their credit than a foreclosure, whereas a foreclosure is a forced situation where the lender takes over. For agents, though, it's more paperwork, a lot more time, and you're usually dealing with emotional clients. I've done a handful, and every time it's been an emotional situation. Their distress is already a bad situation. We're helping them, but it's not really the help they want. It is not as bad as foreclosure, but you're still dealing with this client that's probably disgruntled or not the happiest or whatever. Opposed to foreclosure, it's already done. They're out. It's been taken over. You're not really dealing with that client no more. You're dealing with the banks, and it's very easy, and it's all about the dollars and cents. And there's no emotion in it for the bank. So that's the biggest piece of it. And it's one of those things as an agent, to me, if you're going to get into the short sale niche, you got to be expecting that you're going to be dealing with a lot of emotional people. I don't think it's regular at all because you're negotiating debt. That's the real big thing you're doing. You're negotiating the debt and managing emotions, and it's more time. So if you really think about it, I think it's one of the hardest deals. But if you become an expert at it, you have a niche and it's something you can do. When I first came into real estate, it was very common to see short sales a lot. I think that trend is probably picking up more and more. The more files we're seeing, I think it's picking up a little bit, right? You're going to see them and you're going to come in contact. What's going to happen is that you as an agent, you're going to come and talk to somebody. They're going to be in this situation. And then you're going to have to start navigating through this and giving them the solutions to make sure they don't go into foreclosure. You're helping them, but it's just a long process. I think also, let's get into the key players and documents. You got the home seller, homeowner in a hardship situation. You got the lenders and banks. In this case, you're going to have what they call a asset manager. You probably have someone that you're talking to on a weekly basis to give updates. And you got to negotiate with the asset manager, the seller, the buyer's agent, and the buyer. So you have to be on point with your negotiations because it's not just a normal listing. The documents that you're going to need essentially is of course, the listing agreement signed by the seller. There's usually this hardship packet that the seller has to submit, a short sale package. And that's where they're going to outline their debts and what's going on with them or whatever's happened with their health or something, the reasons why they can't really keep up. It's a package that they have to fill out. And that package got to go over to the lender or to the mortgage company, to the asset manager, and they review it. They're looking at if it's really the best situation for them on the asset management portion of it. Is it the best solution to do a short sale versus foreclosure? And that's all they're really doing. They're just looking at the package and say, okay, if we foreclose, we might lose this. If we do the short sale and we get this price, we're going to get this. So they'll probably do that. Or the other alternative, the forbearance. That's another option sometimes with the asset managers. They get the package and they'll be like, oh, no, we're not going to short sell. We're not going to foreclose on you right now. We're going to give you a forbearance for 13 months to get your stuff together. At 13 months, we're going to come back and try and do something. Look at this again. And the forbearance, if you don't know what the forbearance is, where they don't require you to pay for a certain amount of time. Then on the back end of the 360 months, they're going to add those 13 months that you didn't pay. So that's a forbearance. So you could get a couple of different options there, but typically this is the process when you meet the seller that you're going to navigate through those different situations. You're also going to need a third party authorization and release form. It's a standard form. I'm going to show you a picture of it on the next screen so you can see what it looks like. It's a third party authorization form where the seller will fill it out, or y'all fill it out together. Essentially, it's going to authorize you as a real estate agent to call the bank and speak on the seller's behalf about the process. Because most times a seller doesn't know all that it takes to do this. If they did, they wouldn't hire us, right? So you would get this authorization form signed by the seller, and then in that process, you get it to the bank, and then there afterwards, every time, every week, you would call in for, hey, what's the approved price and what else they need or want in order for you to sell the property. And there's a couple of different ways you can do this, and I'm going to talk about the couple of different ways, but the third-party authorization form is really the most critical piece. So you can call that asset manager and start having conversations on how you need to market or how you need to price or what you need to do. Sometime you may already have an offer in hand, and you're going to have to call this asset manager, but they won't talk to you unless you have the third-party authorization form signed. And then, of course, you got the buyer's agent, any HOAs, any second liens on it, or anything like that. You got the title company involved. You may have attorneys involved. So there's all these different players and documents that you have to really navigate and be great at it in order to close this deal. So it's just not a typical listing in my perspective. Okay. Any questions about this up to this point? Okay, let's keep on going. Let's get to the process. I may look checklist here. You get the initial call, hey, I want to sell, or hey, I'm having distress, or hey, this is what's going on, and you got to go out and you're doing an evaluation of the situation, right? The situation you're going out and you're seeing it is upside down, and you want to identify that, and they're in a need to sell, right? So the first thing you have to do is explain the process to them and explain to them that, hey, look, there's some options here. You can do this short sale, but in order to do the short sale, you have to submit for it, Mr. Seller. You're going to have to validate your hardship to your investor, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, whoever it may be, and they're going to have to approve it in order for you to sell your house for less than what you owe, right? Also in that process, you'll need a listing agreement, the short sale addendum, which we're going to talk about in a second, and the third-party authorization form. It's going to have the social security number and the loan number. They're going to ask you for the client's social security number, and they're going to ask you for the loan number every time. You're going to call in so much because you're going to be calling in every week. You're probably going to almost memorize both of those numbers, to be honest with you, right? As many times as you're going to call. They'll probably ask for any of the hardship proof of, hey, you're behind on this or you're behind on that, or hey, I have to pay this, and I just got fired, or whatever situation, I just lost some income. You'll have to have all that documentation in order to do that. And of course, you got to work with the seller to get that, but the package itself is basically what you're going to have to put together in order to present to the asset manager in order to get the short sale approved. Oftentimes, and here's where it starts to get tricky, all right? There's a lot of times where agents will start the process and they will put the property on the market. And when they do it, the common mistake is the agent will put the property on the market with the anticipated short sale price. And this is where agents make mistakes. It is possible to put a property on the market knowing that you're going through the process for short sale. That is fine, all right? And if you're going to do it that way, the comments inside the MLS need to say pending lender's approval, subject to lender approval, or whatever that is, requested short sale in process, okay? I think those comments in the confidential remarks is critical. And I think that's where agents don't really do that, right? So you come in on the buyer side, you don't know that the agent's trying to do this, and they have no indication whatsoever that's going on, or they don't put the short sale criteria on the listing. And that's really the big problem that I see a lot of times. If you're the buyer's agent and you do see that, you have to start asking questions. How far along are you in the process with the package? What is going on with the asset manager or loss mitigation section? Are you in contact? Have they given you an indication? Have you done a BPO? Have you done any of this stuff in order to get this thing approved? Because if you come into the very beginning of it and they're just starting, it's going to be a long transaction. And you have to manage the expectation of the buyer at that point in time. Now, if you get into it and they're like, hey, we got the BPO, they've already came out and look at the house, or they're saying, hey, I have no trouble getting in with the asset manager, I have no trouble getting to the loss mitigation section, they're Johnny on the spot, I'm having great communication with them, it may not be as long. But if you're having a conversation with the listing agent and they're like, oh, it's hard to get a hold of them, or whatever case may be, then you got to expect that it's going to be a hard, long transaction. Now, it may be well worth it for your buyer, right? It may be totally worth it for their buyer because they're probably getting something less expensive, and it could be worth the wait. That's the reason it works out for the buyer. But on the part of the agent, you have to do your part to manage that expectation. That's where a lot of buyers get fatigued and say, oh, I just don't want to be a part of this, or hey, I got to have a place to live. It's not for those buyers that need an immediate occupancy and stuff like that. That's not for this. Short sales is not for them unless it's a short sale that's approved. I would prefer that you go out to the evaluation with the seller, and if that's the case, I would prefer that you go through the process to get it approved, then put it on the market. But that doesn't always take place, because sometimes when you call in the packages presented, the loss mitigation section will ask, okay, hey, we'll approve it once we get an offer, right? So there's where the problem comes in. And hey, we put the package in, we're looking at it, we'll do a short sale once we get an offer. If you're the buyer's agent, you place the offer, and now it's got to go through the process of approval. You need to really have the conversation with your buyers and everyone involved. Questions about that before I go to the next part? That's the most confusing thing, especially when you're new. So now, once you do that, you put the offer, you get the offer, you submit it, right? Submit the full package to the lender. Then you start to track the negotiations in terms of what that looks like. You're going to follow up weekly. If you're the listing agent, the BPO will probably come out, the appraiser come out. You want to be present during that appraisal. It's not like a normal listing. I really recommend that you come out when the appraiser or they do the BPO. You want to be there. You want to be present. You want to present your comps to show that. You probably need to talk about repairs, all right? Most times sellers can't do repairs. They don't have any money. So you got to point that out to the appraiser. Say, hey, look, we need to price it here because of this and that and the third. That's the reason you need to be present during this appraisal, especially if you have a house with a bunch of repairs. Step 6, bank negotiations. That's probably going to happen at that point in time. Once they do the appraisal, then they'll come out with this approval letter on step 7, and it verifies whatever the net's going to be. It verifies what they're going to pay everybody, the commissions, verifies the deadline that the approval for. It's not just an open approval. They'll sit there and say the approval letter is from now until, hey, you have 4 months to close this deal, and they'll put an end date on it. All right, so it's not an open all be all there. It's going to have usually about 90 days to 4 months the approval letter will be for. All right, and then everything after that, it turns into a normal listing once you have all this. If you already have a contract, there may be adjustments on the contract based on the lender saying what they're going to approve. Hey, you went in contract for 200,000, and the lender comes out and says, oh, we're not going to take 200,000 based on what we're seeing. We want 205. Okay, I've never seen the lender go lower than what the offer price is for obvious reasons, but you may get something like, we want $10,000, we want $5,000. So you may have to tell your buyer to be flexible to adjust. That is a possibility. If you do this all before and you get the approval before, again, you don't have to do that, and you're putting the house on the market at the price they approved, so you don't go through all that headache. To the right there, you have the example of the authorization form. As you see, it has the borrower's name, you have the property address, the account for the mortgage, and anything else. It has all the applicable information. It also has out there for your social security number, where the seller's social security number. And then you have to sign it, and the seller has to sign it. That's part of the package to go forward towards the loss mitigation section for the investor. There's another portion here that they'll ask too as well that we didn't talk about. They will ask you for the preliminary HUD 1. And you're going to get this from the actual title company. So how does this work? So you get into this process, you're asked the title company, hey, I need a preliminary HUD 1 statement. And the preliminary HUD 1 statement will also be part of the package. All right, so they got to see everything, the taxes, insurance. Most times people are behind on their taxes on it, stuff like that. Is there a second lien on the house? Is there any other liens on the house? Is there HOAs pending or something like that? So they'll do the HUD 1 statement, meaning it came from the title company and they did the research on the property to see if there's any other monies owed on this property. So that's one of the things that the bank will require too. So don't forget that as well, along with the authorization form. Challenges and pitfalls with this. I think the biggest challenge is that it's a lengthy time. All right. There's probably multiple liens on it, and the possibility of your buyer walking away. I think that's the most common challenges there. I think the mistakes that agents need to avoid is not informing the other agent that this is pending or the potential for a short sale. I think that's a big pitfall. Over promising the results. You come into the seller and say, oh yeah, we're going to be able to get this, or you're telling the other side something that's over promising results. And then underpricing it for a quick sale. That's the biggest problem. You may price it low, and then the bank comes back and says, no, that's not where we're going to approve. And then the other one is managing your buyer's expectations. I put down here the mindset for success. Agents really need to focus on patience, the documentation, and also position themselves as the problem solver, just making sure you stay on course with your seller through this process. The short sale addendum. In short, no pun intended, this form is pretty simple, right? If you look at it, the actual addendum itself says the seller requires the consent of the lien holder to sell the property pursuant to this contract, the lien holder's agreement to accept the seller's net proceeds in full satisfaction of the seller's liability under the mortgage loan, and provide the seller an executed release of lien against the property in a recorded format. That's what this addendum is really telling buyer and seller. All right. Now it also says down in section D, if the seller does not notify the buyer that the seller has obtained the lender's consent and agreement on or before blank date, this contract terminates and the earnest money will be refunded to the buyer. Seller must notify buyer immediately if the lender's consent and agreement is obtained. For purposes of performance, the effective date of the contract changes to the date seller provides buyer notice of lien holder's consent and agreement. It's called the amended date. So let's talk this out. This is really where we get to the crux of this whole thing. This is dependent on the seller getting consent or the approval of the short sale, right? And then the seller has to notify the buyer by a certain date. I'll ask the buyer, how long are you willing to mess around with this thing? And that's the date I put in there, all right? Once the consent comes out, once the approval comes out, all of the dates and everything with the contract is based off that date. That's the amended effective date, option period, and all this other stuff is adjusted on that. So we could write a contract 2 months ago and not get the approval until today. Now everything starts on that amended date. That's the amended effective date. And that's really the addendum. There's other things in there and it says, okay, if there's no consent, the buyer gets their earnest money back. But that's really the bulk of the addendum. What else with us is really there? That's really it. That's what this form really does. We would have to buyer and seller's consent on there, signing on it. Questions?
So when it comes to the seller, you estimate the price based on the market value plus commissions the and the closing costs. So what's the best practices to ensure that you cover the best you can so the bank does not push back?
Okay. What I would want, say you go out there and this is a potential, it develops into a potential short sale. The best practice is first getting the third party authorization form signed first. Okay. Listing agreement, third party authorization. Pick up the phone. Find out who the asset manager really is going to be. Is the situation going to be where it's going to be multiple people you're talking to or just one person? That's the real key to me. Now, if there's going to be multiple people here, okay, that one's off, right? The next thing is to go to the title company and ask for a preliminary HUD 1 statement. I want you to do that before you put it on the market, because the title is going to do the research and see exactly what is owed on the property. It's going to come back and tell you exactly to the penny, hey, this is what's owed. From there, you probably assess where we are with the market. Is it able to be sold? What's the situation? I'm just going to use 200,000. You do all the calculations to get the 6% and everything paid off. It's 200,000, right? It depends on the hardship. We'll go back to the asset manager, give them the HUD 1 statement, and ask based on repairs, based on the market, based on what you would sit there and say, if we listed it at 180,000, we would be able to move this property in X amount of months. And that's what you would request, right? Then you would get the approval or not. But if it came down to listing the property, I would list the property at 200K to be on the safe side. That's where I would list the property at. If I didn't have the approval, I don't think I would try and list this property at 180,000, knowing that it takes 200,000 to clear, and put the comments in subject to lender's approval. You're going to have people argue with that all the time, right? You're going to have tons of brokers argue with that all the time. I know the safest thing is probably listed at 200,000, put the package in, and then you could put the comments in. Sellers very motivated, whatever, we're accepting all offers to entice people to put something in. And then once you get something at 180, you sit there and say, okay, Mr. Loss mitigation section, Mr. Asset Manager, whoever I need to talk to, I got an offer at 180, and then go through the process. You see what I'm saying? But you would have to advertise and market in such a way to get that lesser than 200 offer, and that comes back to your marketing skills. Now, as you do this process and you get the approval and it comes back at 190, I would list it as 190. The best practice is probably to figure that out with the HUD 1, put it out there, and then the comments you would put in the listing is seller accepts all offers, sellers motivated, sellers will entertain any offer.
Does the seller have the right, or is it appropriate for the seller to have these conversations with the bank before we came in? Is that possible? Is that an option? Or is
Well,
that not recommended?
you can talk better than the seller, right? The seller does his part with the package, right, and fill it out and give you third party authorization, and then you take it from there and speak on behalf of the seller. That's what that third party authorization is going to get you to get you.
Okay.
Who knows? Maybe the seller is better. I don't know, but I think the ones I've done, I get everything together and then I take it from there, and I'm working directly with the asset manager and talking to them like, okay, we can price it here. Hey, when you guys coming out, I want to show you these repairs. Hey, we're missing a door here. Oh, this is not working because of what I know about the market. If we priced it here, we could move this property. It's going to be a conversation just like I'm talking to you right now. You'll be doing the same thing about here's the list of all the repairs. Here's what the market is showing. I feel if we listed it here, we would be able to sell this in 3 months if we listed here. I don't think the seller is going to do that.
Right. Okay, when it comes to timeframes, how long is the average time for a short sale? I understand every case is different, but what is average?
It depends on what phase it's at. Approved short sale, it's probably normal. I would say normal in the sense of 60 days approved. And that could depend on the communication back and forth with the asset manager. Not approved and we're requesting for it, 4 to 6 months.
So it's a very lengthy process, but during this time, the seller is still responsible to continue making payments?
They should be. That depends
Okay.
on the mortgage person. They're probably not making payments, more than likely. But are they responsible for making payments? Yes. And if they don't, it's just the process. I've seen people, I think I told you before, I had a property that this guy hadn't made a payment in like 26 months and he didn't go in foreclosure. I'm not sure that's going to happen today, but that happened a while back and they didn't have him go in foreclosure and we were able to do a short sale. But they gave him a 13-month forbearance, so he didn't have to pay for 13 months. Then when that 13 months was over, he did another 13 months or something like that where he didn't pay. And then finally we came along and we put the short sale package in. They approved the short sale and then we sold it. But he hadn't made a payment in 26 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
So
you
it
very
just depends. It just depends. Okay. All right, team. That's it. Short and sweet today. Short and sweet. All right. Hope you got something out of it. If you got questions, don't hesitate. Oh, we got a question here. It'll be on our site, Brenda. It would be on thewarteam.com. I'll send it to you. It's at thewarteam.com. Okay. That is it, folks.
Bye, Ben. Thank you.